It is 9 o'clock. Today is Thursday, February 20th, 2025. I'm going to call the meeting to order. I don't have my hammer, Karen. Yeah. So I'll have to pound on the table. Okay, if you're able to rise, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we have everybody here. Oh, here we go. That's all right. That's right. Now my day is complete. Okay, we have a quorum here today, so we are good with that. I'm going to read the meeting procedure statement. The governing board and its committees conduct all of their meetings in compliance with Arizona Planned Community Association open meeting laws per Arizona Revised Statutes 33-1804 and in concert with RCSCW bylaws, policies, and standing rules. Parliamentary procedures, as outlined in the most recent edition of Robert's Rules of Order, will also be followed in all meetings as appropriate, consistent with Bylaw 3.07 entitled Procedures for Owner-Member Meetings and Standing Rules Number 2 and Number 3. Okay, with that, we'll move to our first item of business, which is the approval of the minutes from our January 23rd, 2025 regular meeting. Are there any changes, additions, or deletions to those from the board? Okay, they will be accepted as written. We'll move into new business now. We will go to agenda item 3.01, which is a motion to talk about policy FI10. Procurement policy. I'll ask Christine Novello to walk us through that.
Thank you, President Leary. Per the Budget and Finance Committee recommendation, I move that the Governing Board approve in-gross language revisions to Financial Policy FI10, Procurement Policy, as redlined.
Can I get a second? Okay, Director Williams seconded it. Okay, we will open the floor to discussion on this policy. Yes, Director Novello, why don't you lead us off?
Thank you. Why don't I explain a little bit of the background? All of our committees review our policies, as we know, and we make sure that they're in alignment with the best interests of the association. For this one, the Budget and Finance Committee made a few proposed changes, recommended changes in Section 6. To summarize some of the discussion, what the committee noted and what residents have commented on as well. There were a few things where this policy as originally written, as it is currently written, overlaps with policy LO2, which is conflict of interest policy. The conflict of interest policy really pertains more directly to the governing board and to the general manager. We were trying to sort out as a committee the overlaps. So the first proposed addition sort of speaks to both of those. The piece of feedback we received both from residents and members of the committee were that the committee members themselves are not mentioned in LO2, so the committee elected to add a mention to that so that, if you will, effectively, this purchasing type of conflict of the portion of the LO2 that pertains to purchasing, that contains the specific numbers and amounts of gifts that could be received, would also apply to members of our standing committees. So that's effectively the intention of the changes to 6.1. In 6.2, we had lots of discussions, and just again to summarize what the changes entail. This policy duplicates some of what's in the employee handbook as well. So again, 6.1 is more governing board and general manager and committees. 6.2 pertains to employees. So rather than specifying or duplicating that part of the employee handbook, the Budget and Finance Committee recommends that we put into the general manager's responsibilities the need to add this kind of a gift from vendors policy into the employee handbook. And by the way, it is there. Just wanted to say this puts into policy the what, which is establish this limit, gives removes the specific dollar value from our governance policy and puts the value establishment into the hands of the general manager. And that the guidelines and so forth are all included in the employee handbook. So that was the summary. We had a lot of discussion back and forth as a committee in terms of whether or not that dollar value would be a governance policy or not. Again, the committee has elected to recommend we remove it from the governance policy, from our policies here, and assumes that the governing board continues to have the ability to review the employee handbook as necessary to ensure that the dollar values are there and that it complies with law. So that's a summary, in my view, of the changes here. Thanks, President
Okay,
Murray.
thank you. Any discussion from the board? Nobody? Okay, I will start this discussion then. My recollection of how this got started is there was concern by one of the B&F committee members that there were two things that he saw. One was the dollar limit for accepting a gratuity he felt was too low and it should be raised. And the other item was that there was concern about language that says immediate dismissal is grounds for immediate dismissal for violation of the policy. Then during the course of that, that's where we discovered LO2 covers the general manager and the governing board. And so my concern is statement 6.1.1, do we need a policy statement that tells members that they're covered by another policy?
Great point. And we wanted to bring this up here for the entire board to discuss. It was the Budget and Finance Committee and the member of the committee that took this on, the review on, felt it was necessary to make some kind of a tie to LO2, and this was how it was elected. But also, since Budget and Finance does not have the oversight of LO2, that's not in our purview. The committee and the residents, we took the residents' feedback quite seriously. It was the view of the Budget and Finance Committee that mentioning or including the committee members was really the key part. So wanted to make an alignment to LO2 or to call that out, but also to add the committee members to LO2. But we're not able to do that, so we put it here. Whether that's a right decision or wrong, that's what we're here to discuss.
So my concern is that if we're going to do this, then shouldn't we put an equivalent statement into LO2? And we get into these recursive loops.
Well, one thing, I'm sorry, I'm out of order.
Yeah.
One thing that we could, in my opinion, elect to do as a board is move this language or request that the policy LO2 be updated to include committee members, and I think we'll be done.
And I think that's reasonable, but I don't see a reason to have this statement in this policy. And I think LO2 should include, as you pointed out, committee members, but it should include all committee members, not just the standing committees. So any disagreement, discussion?
Actually, I think that when you look at 6.1.1, to me, I think it's almost a moot point, because if this is an expectation, I don't think we need to detail it in every place we have to put it. To me, if I look at 6.2, that is the spirit of what we're looking for. You know, the part that's stricken is the dollar value. I don't think that's a policy issue. I think the issue here is that we recognize that there has to be a threshold, and I believe it's up to the general manager to make that determination. So in my perception here, I could live with striking 6.1.1. I don't feel either that it could go either way. I mean, but I think it's kind of silly to put it in there. The real crux of this is 6.2, and I would be happy with that, and I think it would be very inclusive, and it would be very definitive, and I think you're living under a rock if you think that it's okay to accept some kind of a gratuity.
And if I may, a quick review of the employee handbooks shows that our employees are subject to all of that. So again, we started off, as President Leary outlined in the review, simply wanting to do those two things, to tie our employee handbook directly and not duplicate it, and then took on board the feedback and felt it was important as a committee to include our committee members in the conflict of interest. So may I ask, I believe it's the president who traditionally reviews and updates those general policies, am I correct? So could we review policy LO2 and consider adding that in?
Yes, I will take that as a to-do.
With that as an accepted action, I would be okay striking 6.1.1 and 6.1.2.
I would agree with that. In fact, since one of the things that I noticed about this policy in particular is that it covers both governing board directors and the general manager, when the general manager and governing board directors are already covered by LO2. So I wonder if this policy should cover employees only and then not duplicate what we have there. Plus, the employees have the handbook that has what is essentially an operational policy. Do we need to make this a policy that's going to override the existing policy? So what I'm suggesting, and also because the language for grounds for immediate dismissal have crept back into this update, and it was a concern for the original reason for attacking this, is that we leave this policy as is and know that, and the only thing as is in terms of the things that were approached, but maybe remove committee members, governing board directors, and have them covered by LO2.
Mm-hmm.
And
That was
have
my
this
proposal.
pertain just to employees, but leave all of the language as it currently exists and change only paragraph 6.1.
I see. So your proposal, President Leary, is that we not only strike the proposed 6.1.1 and 6.1.2, but that we modify the what's in 6.1 to state, I'm reading it now. There's a strict prohibition for any employee. Just remove that next part. There's a strict prohibition for any employee from participating in any manner in such contract, sale, or purchase. Is that or do we remove 6.1 overall?
So what I'm suggesting is if we look at the current, policy, FI10, if 6.1 stays the same as what is here, and then 6.2 simply says gratuities exceeding, well, you can see it's red, it's crossed out.
It's exactly what's written.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So,
and then all of what I'm suggesting is remove 6.1.1, 6.1.2, and return the deleted text in the proposed changes, and also do not accept the other language that has been added here. So return it to its current state.
I completely disagree. The recommendation of the recommendation of the committee stands, right? That the general manager is required to communicate. That's just our recommendation. So I'm entitled to disagree. That is not a simple change. And the Budget and Finance Committee recommends that we put into the hands of the general manager the authority to establish the dollar value and to establish the, whatever the disciplinary actions are. That we don't state I would not want to return that language back. That is, that was the crux of the recommendation when we started this. So those struck out portions of 6.2 are really essential.
Director Rhodes.
I agree with Director Novello. You know, I think that the spirit of the change is in 6.2. You know, that's when we ask the general manager to set the parameters. Our role is to ensure that there is a policy, that's addressed. I don't think it's our role to cite the specifics of $25 or $3 or whatever. I think that we look to the general manager and we have him do it. I think that's the spirit of what we're trying to do here.
But if you look at LO2, it expressly defines the dollar amount in LO2.
That's okay. You know,
So,
that's,
I mean,
that's
I mean,
we're not reviewing that. I mean, we're reviewing
I know, but
this.
I'm just trying to be consistent. So, but in any event, I can live with leaving the added language in here. You know, I can live with that. But I think is it worth discussing 6.1 and removing references to the governing board director and committee members, and then put that language in the LO2? Is that what we did? Is that what I'm supposed to do? Yes.
My recommendation or my suggestion was to take the 6.1.2 specifically, and the spirit there is to add committee members, our standing committee members, to LO2 as it pertains to vendor gifts. That's all. LO2 is a very sweeping conflict of interest policy. There's a section in there that pertains to vendor gifts. So we would just add committee members to that portion of
In
LO2.
So take 6.1.2 out. So
And 6.1.1, we could remove both subsets if we agree to add the committee members to L02. I would be okay with that personally.
okay. So so let me summarize. So remove 6.1.1, 6.1.2, leave in the proposed change to 6.2.
A separate action that we would agree to give the governing board president the task or the follow-up. I don't know if we do that here, but we would accept the action. Jack had already agreed to that action to review L02 and to add that language to, or something similar, some reference.
Yeah, I was just looking at just what has been put in front of us for right now, but yes. Okay. Okay. Any other discussion?
As a point of order, if we agree, shall I modify do I make a motion to?
Yeah, point of order is if we've violated a rule, but yes, you should revise your motion.
Okay. Then I make a motion to modify my original motion. I'll restate it. Hold on a moment. Per the Budget and Finance Committee, I move that the governing board approve in-gross language revisions to the financial policy FI10 as redlined, with the additional removing sections 6.1.1 and sections 6.1.2. Apologies, I'm looking at our parliamentarian.
Okay, stand at ease.
Okay, I've been advised by the parliamentarian. I'm going to start again. I make a motion to amend my previous motion by striking sections 6.1.1 and 6.1.2 from the red line policy.
Can I get a second on that? Second from Mr. Rhodes, Director Rhodes. Any discussion? Okay, with that, I'll call for a voice vote. I'll start with Director Horvath. Yes, you're voting for just the striking of 6.1.1 and 6.1.2.
Yes.
Director Graham?
Yes.
Director Novello?
Yes.
Director Chatton?
Yes.
Director Piaskowski? Yes. Director Williams? Yes. Director Rhodes?
Yes.
And Director Hurley?
No.
Okay.
Okay, it passes 7-1. Okay, now you want to,
The original motion is still on the floor.
yeah, so you want to read your amended motion?
Per the Budget and Finance Committee recommendation, I move that the governing board approve in-gross language revisions as just revised to to Financial Policy FI10 Procurement Policy as redlined.
Okay, you get a second, because it's a new motion. Director Chatton. Okay, yes, you will vote on the proposed changes as amended without 6.1.1 and 6.1.2, leaving in the language of 6.2. I'll start at the other end. Director Hurley?
Could I ask Director Novello to restate the motion, please?
Yes.
Darn it. Certainly. Per the Budget and Finance Committee recommendation, I move that the governing board approve in-gross language revisions as amended to Financial Policy FI10 Procurement Policy. Or,
Thank you, yes.
Okay, Director Rhodes?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes.
Director Piaskowski?
Yes.
Director Chatton?
Yes.
Director Novello?
yes.
Director Graham?
Yes.
Director Horvath?
Yes.
Okay, it passes 8 unanimously, and then I will also take the task of revising LO2. So, okay, great. Our next item of business is a motion about revised policy M01, and I'll look to Director Piaskowski for that.
Okay, this will be way easier than the last one. Basically, we're doing this because of the lien. So my motion is, I move that the governing board approves revision to membership policy M01, membership and activity cards for facility use, section 2, subsection 2.1 as redlined.
Can I get a second for that? Second. Okay, Director Williams. I'll open the floor to discussion from the board. Any discussion? Director Piaskowski, can you tell us what the change is?
Basically, we had a 90-day lien to put a lien on a house. We are backing that up to 60 days because of the new law.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Oh. Okay, yes, sir.
I actually think this is codifying what we're doing right now. You know, the law changed 6 months ago, maybe? When? September? Yeah. So this is just codifying what we're doing.
Exactly. We have to go through the process. Okay, with that, any discussion? I should have asked for the discussion from the audience last time. Any questions online? I see none.
Nothing.
Okay, then with that, we'll take a vote. Director Horvath, yes, you're voting for the change. No, you're voting against it.
Yes.
Director Graham,
Yes.
Director Novello,
Yes.
Director Chatton,
Yes.
Director Piaskowski,
Yes.
Director Williams,
Yes.
Director Rhodes,
Yes.
and Director Hurley.
Yes.
Okay, it passes unanimously. Okay, next one is revised new business item 3.03, a motion to revise golf policy G06, and that is from Director Rudy Graham.
Thank you, President Leary.
At this time, I do not have a motion, as the working group completed their work the day after our last committee meeting, and this proposed revision has not had an opportunity to go through the full committee. So after it does that at the March meeting, I will bring this back for a recommendation to the board.
Okay, in that case, we will not take a vote on this, and the motion at this point is null. Okay, any questions or discussion on that? Okay, next one is our motion for the revised RR&Ps. Director Chatton?
Facts and findings.
Oh, sorry, I skipped over that. Okay, Director Horvath, yeah, we are facts and findings, Echo Mesa well pump replacement. Thank you.
Okay, yes, this was to replace the well.
Just read the motion, please. Read the
Okay.
motion first.
Okay, I move that the governing board approve the $111,201 from the FY 2024-25 allowances fund for the emergency repair replacement of the Echo Mesa well pump per parameters of policy FI 10 in relation to the general manager's authorized spend limit not to exceed $50,000.
Okay, thank you. Second from Director Novello. Now, Director Horvath, can you explain what this is about?
Yeah, just quickly, the pump casing and the pump were defective and needed to be replaced. Also, some of the wiring that was provided to the pump on the conduit was in the ground long enough. We know about the 7-year in Arizona before it starts to break, so it was also replaced, and so we've got a complete replacement there, and it should be good for a lot of years.
Okay, we discussed this at our workshop meeting last Friday. Are there any questions from the board? From the audience? Online?
Nothing.
Okay, then with that, Director Horvath, if you would read your motion again?
I move that the governing board approve the $111,201 from the FY 2024-25 allowances fund for the emergency repair and replacement of the Echo Mesa well pump per parameters of policy FI 10 in relation to the general manager's authorized spend limit not to exceed $50,000.
Okay, thank you. Voice vote is yes, you are voting for allowing the general manager to spend the money. No is you are not allowing him to spend the money. I'll start with Director Hurley.
Yes.
Director
Yes.
Rhodes.
Yes.
Director Williams.
Yes.
Wyskowski.
Yes.
Chatton.
Yes.
Novello.
Yes.
Graham.
Yes.
And Horvath.
Yes.
A unanimous vote. Thank you. Now we will go to agenda item 3.05, the motion for the revised RR&Ps. I'll turn that over to Director Chatton.
Per recommendation of the Chartered Clubs Committee and with input from Sun City West Chartered Clubs, I move that the governing board approve in gross language revisions to the revised RR&Ps, Chartered Club rules, regulations, and procedures as redlined as of March 2025.
Second? Do I have a second?
I second.
Director Williams. Okay, we will have discussion. Director Chatton, you want to tell us what this is about?
Well, we're kind of waiting to get to the short portion of this meeting today. The RR&Ps have been looked at by a working group headed up by Nick Turner and Vicky. And this is, they have had several meetings. The board has received a list, or the presentation that Nick had prepared on the revised RR&Ps, and they've also received the total redlined version of the RR&Ps. They were handed out and sent at the working group last week, or the governing board workshop last week. So I know there have been several questions, some rather lengthy, some rather short. So I think the discussion this morning is we want to hear from anyone who has any issue with our RR&Ps as they stand. But I would also say that if this gets to be a lengthy process, in other words, if we have several directors that are would like to see some changes, and we have several from the clubs that want to see changes, I imagine in the end this will be turned back to the working group, and that those people with questions can go to the working group and have some of those questions addressed before it comes back to the governing board. And with that, I guess we'll open it up to questions or comments from the directors.
Okay, with that, I'll take discussion from the board. Director Williams, Director Rhodes, sorry.
Years ago, I was in a meeting at the Pentagon, and one of the four-star generals came in and talked about a Herculean effort on what we were doing. And I didn't understand what he meant until I read this document. So I really have to take my hat off to Nick and Vicki Erla and, you know, the people that really put a lot of time and effort into this, because it's very, very clear that it has been gone through. However, I do have some concerns, and I'm just going to talk about a couple things in very general ways right now, and I don't want to, because I think it's going to stimulate some discussion. I think the very first thing, and the thing that jumps off the page at me, is accommodations. It's the very last thing in the. So I guess I'm lost, because when you read the verbiage under accommodation, it talks about it can only be done for an exception. And I think they imply that usually it's like during a, quote, a season, yet we permit a 12-month accommodation. And there's nothing in here to say that, well, let's do it again next year. So we're going to have repeat requests for accommodations. So then what is an accommodation? Because you're really changing the profile, and you're changing the parameters of who's going to do what, and, you know, the restriction of our use of our facilities. So to me, in a very general way, I'm not comfortable with the definition of accommodations. And I don't know, and I don't have an answer for it, Dawn, but I just want you to know that that's a deal breaker for me, okay? And so really, I think I'll just pass on that, and I'll turn the mic over to somebody else.
Anybody else? Director Horvath.
Yes, well, of course, any effort is appreciated, especially for the pay they get. But I'm a little bit disappointed with some good suggestions we didn't work on, because there again, if we're going to rewrite, I think we should definitely reorganize the RR&Ps and I'm reading right here, in the chapters by club, but more so by genre at least, where the dance and the sports and the cards, you know, that the RWPs should be trimmed way down to just a general thing that might apply to all clubs, but then be more verbose by genre and maybe even by club if necessary. So we make sure we're not painting a swatch over all the clubs and all the different different types of interactions that could be that can come. So I would like to see, they probably can't do it now, or I don't know how you'd start with something like this, but I think maybe this group is very capable. They could at least start with this. So I can't go with much of anything I see here.
Okay, Director Chatton, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think that the working group responded to a impossible task. You know, it's one of the responsibilities of the Chartered Clubs Committee is to review the RR&Ps every year. And I think that the working group did a really good job of reviewing the RR&Ps. And Nick being the pen man, everything that's in here is not necessarily his opinion, but this is the opinion of the working group. I would tend to agree with you, Dennis, that I think that there's maybe some major, not small editorial things that need to be done, but major rewriting and summarizing and shortening of these. I would agree with Dick that if it were up to me, I felt this since the first day I was on the Chartered Clubs Committee, accommodations would be just stricken because it really doesn't, the clubs that have tried to get an accommodation, it just hasn't worked, and they've wound up going with the general manager to figure out a way to accommodate them. So I don't know that, I personally, I would kind of suggest that what has been done to this point, we could probably accept, because most of it is further defining things and editing small errors that were in there to start with. But in the long run, I think this needs more of maybe more than even a working group. I'm not sure just how to proceed with this, but I think we need a group that would, or maybe it's the board as a whole that looks at it and says, okay, we're gonna make some changes. So those are my comments. Did you have anything to add, Nick? I know you're kind of chomping at the bit there.
Do we have director comments first?
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let's do director
Sorry.
comments first.
Yep.
Okay, Director Piaskowski.
I have to agree. We look at these every single year, and every single year there's changes. So my recommendation would be that we make general policies for all clubs and then break them down to the specific genres that we have on our website. We have 5 of them, right, Casey? 6. Because you know what? As a president, you have to read this and you have to sign off on it. And do you think my rip and sew president really cares about tournaments? She does not. So let's make it so they can read it and understand it. And if they have a problem with it, then they can talk to their liaison. My suggestion. And I know Jack thought about that when he was rewriting them a couple years ago, right, Jack? I mean, it's a big project, but it can't be, we can do it. We need to do it.
Any other comments? Director Novello.
Thank you, President Leary. I concur with the fact that the RR&Ps would benefit from a major simplification. Very difficult to follow. So I do concur with that. I also concur and want to applaud that this is an extraordinary amount of work that went into revising the existing RR&Ps. The time for that simplification direction was probably 6 months ago, I'm just being honest, right? A lot of time and effort has gone in, and I believe there's a lot of improvement here. So let's not lose sight of that. We're here to look at the potential improvements. So those were 2 comments I just wanted to make. I would like to see us simplify these in the future, but again, thank the committee. My comment, though, in addition to all of that editorial sort of commentary, there are a number of our residents, and specifically, it looks like chartered clubs, officers or presidents that have written to the governing board as recently as yesterday. So my question for the committee is, have they had a chance to review those inputs, even though the stated timeframe has gone by? We've had a lot of input that's just come in to the committee specifically pertaining to email, how we're going to recommend email addresses and so forth. Has the committee had the chance to see those, and would we benefit from reviewing?
The committee as a whole has not had a chance to look at those, nor has the working group, to my knowledge.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Director Hurley.
Yeah, this is a comment on some of the content, and that is, I don't care if we adopt this or adopt the shorter version. This is my third go-around with going through RR&Ps, and I'm a little over it. But when the document points to a certain, like there's a thing in here about the IRS, if you could put the section that the IRS applies to this, that would be very helpful. And there's some other areas that apply to state statutes. If you could list a state statute, that would be very helpful, because somebody reading this, it says go to irs.gov. You know how huge that website is? But if it points to the 501c4 area, that would be very, very helpful. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Director Williams.
I know what they've been through because I've been on that road of the other side, and it is an awful amount of work. But I don't think we are ready to jump in and rubber stamp this and say, this is wonderful, we're done, because we're not. And just the comments that Christine mentioned is the things that have just been on Facebook from so many of the clubs, particularly about the issue of email addresses and not being allowed to use them. You know, being an officer of one of our clubs is a really thankless job. It's actually a preparer to run for the governing board. It's your training ground. But it is difficult enough for our clubs to get officers who are willing to make the commitment it takes to keep the clubs going. But I just think that this needs more work. We're not ready to just approve it today, and I appreciate Nick and his crew, because I know that they have put in an immense amount of time, and we appreciate it, but I couldn't support it today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Director Hurley.
Yeah, I have another question, and this would be if the president would address this to Nick Turner, and that is, what was his charter when he set out to do this? What did they ask him to do?
Yeah. John, you want
The
to
working
give
group,
us?
yeah.
Because it's not, with due respect, it's not just one person.
I believe it.
I'm asking the chair of the Charter Clubs Committee to give us that answer. Thank you.
We're tasked on an annual basis to review the RR&Ps. As far as I know, that is the sum total of what we were asked to do, a review of the RR&Ps.
That is correct. Director Rhodes.
I appreciate all of the comments that have been made. But as Director Hurley said, this is 3 times. You know, we can't continue to kick this down the road. You know, and to say, I guess I'm just overwhelmed that we have we have a product that literally hundreds of hours have been put into. There's got to be salvageable parts to it. And whatever we can salvage is going to be better than what we've got. So I guess in the interest of moving forward, you know, I would like to look at this and do a tentative autopsy on it and pick out the parts that we think are the most contentious, deal with them, put it in place, and then with the absolute intent of let's go back and continue to improve this. It's CSI, continuous quality improvement. And I think we can adopt that. I mean, NASA did that very thing. And, you see what we've got there. So I just don't want to put this on the shelf until we can get it absolutely perfect, because we're never going to do that. We're never going to be perfect. But if we can salvage part of this, let's find out what the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 most contentious parts are. Deal with that, do an approval to put it in place, and it'll be better than what we've got. And then continuously strive to improve it.
So a question for you, Director Rhodes. Isn't that what we've been doing?
Not a very good job of it, Jack. I mean, I'm not trying to be flip, but I think that we've got to move on this thing and continue to move on it. There are salvageable parts of this. I spent hours reading this, and I came away with what I thought were 4 or 5 issues that I had with, one of which was the emails, one of which the blinding flash of the obvious is the exceptions. Let's deal with those. Instead of just saying no, let's just wring our hands because we don't like it, we're not going to deal with it. We've got to deal with it. That's our job, is to deal with it. We never have all of the answers. Never. But what we can do is we can find, there's got to be some ground in here. That whole working group, I think they have given us a pretty darn good framework. It's not what we like, but it's a pretty good framework. And I think that there's things in there that we can live with for now. But let's identify the contentious issues. And you know what one of mine are, and I'm willing to stand up to that. I say that we've got to move it forward. We can take 2 or 3 pieces of it now and discuss it and have a recommendation and an action on it. And move it forward, and then continue to have, whether it be the working group we got now, or whether we want to have a new working group, or whatever we want on that. I think that's at our option. We can do that, but don't throw this out. There's parts of it that are salvageable.
So, and that's the purpose of having this discussion. I mean, there have been some statements up here says they would not approve anything that the working group has done. So in order for Director Chatton and the Chartered Clubs Committee, we have to give them some direction in terms of what it is. So we shouldn't just say we can't support it and just send it back. We have to give them some direction on that. So let me go to Director Piaskowski.
I'm just wondering, my suggestion on basic rules and then for the clubs. Casey, would that help you? Would that help Casey mandate or make sure the clubs are all doing what they're supposed to be doing because they have signed off on their specific rules as opposed to reading all 60 pages?
Let me take an answer at that. We had RR&Ps from a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, that were ineffective because they did not have express direction and methods for the clubs to follow. It also was ineffective because there was no teeth in the RR&Ps at that time for the association to deal with bad behavior in terms of clubs, violating our policies, not just the RR&Ps, but our standing policies. So that was the reason why we went through and did the original update. Now, what this working group has done has learned from that experience, has found the holes that were done last time. The RR&Ps, as they are written today, as the ones that are in effect, apply to all clubs. If there is a section about tournaments, then you don't have to read that. It doesn't apply to you. So having separate documents for different clubs, or even a single document with different chapters. It's the same thing we've got now. So the structure of it, I'm kind of, I think we have to give the committee, the Chartered Clubs Committee, and the working group some direction here. And I don't, just tearing it apart and saying, this whole thing is not worth doing is not sufficient direction.
So, and I have to refer back to my colleague, Director Hovarth. I don't think that's what he said, that I don't approve any of it. No, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Dennis, but I think that when we talk about redoing this, I don't think it's going to be that big of a job. Okay. It's going to be a Herculean effect. But still, I think we can visualize what's got to be done. We've already compartmentalized the types of clubs that we have, so we can look at each one of those compartments and to see what are the relevant and the most germane issues, and that can go into that. But we still have the mother document that everyone has to comply with. But we can come up with a subchapter for this type of club, this type of club, and this type of club. And that doesn't mean they're going to be separate rules and they're going to be separate requirements. They're not. It's going to be more of an ease of reference. And it's just a way to get it moving to move. I think we've got the pieces. We just got to put them in the right format and deal with there's probably 5, and I'm going to make that number up, 5 contentious issues that we've never dealt with, and I'm embarrassed to say that. I think exceptions is one of them. But if we have to have we've got to be brave enough to deal with them instead of just kicking it down the road and say, okay, we'll wait till we get all of our answers.
So I guess I'm still struggling with compartmentalizing. Yes, we have organized our clubs into different groups, hobby clubs, athletic clubs, that kind of thing. But these rules apply to everybody that are written in this document. And as I said, if you are a club that doesn't do tournaments, then you don't have to read that chapter. But everything else about your bank accounts, your financing, how to discipline people, these are things not just made up. These are from real experiences of clubs and people in clubs over a great number of years. So they apply to every club. Now, yes, are there some things that are contentious? Accommodations, I agree. That's something that needs to be worked on. So that would be one of the issues. Another one is the issue about email lists. To me, that's a non-issue because all that is saying is that the clubs have to apply to privacy rules and make sure they don't put their list out on the internet. That's all that means. It doesn't mean that people in the clubs can't email each other and have the list within the club. That's all. So there are things that people have to understand, and it is a Herculean effort. Having lived through it once, I think I'm struggling with how what you're proposing would be different.
It's probably not going to be different, Jack. I mean, we're not changing the master document. So the very oversimplistic explanation of this is let's get 3, 2, 1, 5 presidents of each one of these clubs, and let's sit down and say, okay, what are the most germane points of this document? Now remember, you have to comply with the whole thing, but from your perspective to Jolene, what's the name of the club that you belong to? The Rip and Sew. Okay, so let's get Rip and Sew and get 2 or 3 like clubs and have them look. Okay, what are the things you're most interested in? When I studied for my graduate classes when I went to graduate school, one of the things that we did is we studied for the math section. We studied for each one of because we wanted to make sure that we knew that particular aspect of it. This is the same thing. It's a different format. We're going to have this group, they're going to look at that, and then the final product will be a document that's going to have 7 chapters to it. One chapter, or the 6 chapters are the types of clubs that we have, and the 7th chapter is the master document.
That was done. This working group solicited input from all of these club presidents.
We've got it then.
Twice, thank you. Yes, Director Hurley.
Yes. This goes back at least 5 years that I've been involved with it. And I think one thing that we haven't really considered is what this constant change does to the clubs.
Right.
They have no idea what they're supposed to follow. I would recommend that we approve this as it stands and have the club look at other things like accommodations later as a separate item. But we need to put a stake in the ground and say, here it is. That's my input.
Yes, Director Pyskowski? Oh, Director, who was first? Yes, please go.
Thanks, and thank you very much, Director Horvath. I'm looking at policy CO3, working groups, right? This is how working groups are constructed. As a chairperson of a committee, I received significant pushback from my fellow directors about establishing a working group at all. I was not allowed to establish a working group until everyone was confident that I complied with that policy. So we should all know that working groups have a very specific structure, including what they're directed to do. There's a very specific charter that this working group was asked to take on. I don't know, John, whether or not what we're discussing here expands the charter, whether it would require a different discrete purpose. But every working group, it's not a subcommittee, folks. It's a discrete deliverable. And this working group, whether we can debate the specifics of what it contains, this working group did what it was asked to do, to the best of my knowledge. I understand that we are all compelled to make, we want to see what's best for the association. We have some great ideas about how to move forward and further improve the RR&Ps, but this working group had a very specific charter, and as we just heard from others here, we should look at that output, which I assume complied with that charter, and say, is there something here that we disagree with? We've identified a few things. We had some late-breaking input. That came in this week. I have no doubt that the committee and the working group looked at all the inputs. We can see that in the presentation. We've been asked as directors to provide inputs many times. So the accommodations areas and a few other areas may be things that we could say, take one more look at those. I only suggested in my comment that we look at the late-breaking input from several of our club presidents that came in asking for us to look at that specific around email. I'm not saying it wasn't looked at, just want to make sure that we are considering all of that. That's my specifics. And as Tim was just mentioning, I think what we're looking at here is an output that a lot of time went into. If we have other further recommendations to improve this, that might be release candidate 3. That might be something that is done by an additional working group if the chairperson of that committee agrees that it's worthwhile. But this working group has put in thousands of hours of time, so we should consider what they have to say, and I believe that we're all in agreement on that. Where no one's saying, oh, and we could do that. We could vote, no, we're not going to accept any of this and reject it. I think we'd be rejecting a lot of good work in my view, but nonetheless, let's look at the charter and look at the output that came from that. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Director Chatton? He wants to respond to Director Novello.
Well, I'm just, I think the working group did do what was asked of them. I think if we move this, I'm not opposed to approving what they have presented here. but only if people understand that this isn't the end all, because there are so many more issues that need to be addressed. And I would suggest that by the next governing board workshop, that directors bring forward what they feel should be addressed in any further revisions, and we take those one at a time. And whether we refer those back to the current working group or we create another working group that perhaps has some directors involved, then we can move those issues forward individually, trying to look at this entire, all these RR&Ps and say we should change this and change that and change that and change that. That's impossible. We have to take one bite at a time. But I think it's this board that has to determine what issues we want to look at further. And I would suggest that, again, I would suggest that we adopt what we has been presented, if the board agrees to do that or not, but then come back at a workshop maybe next month so that the directors can present those areas that they would like to see readdressed, and do them, we can set priorities and do them one at a time.
Okay, thank you. Director Horvath.
Okay, well, I'm back with where Dick was also, is what I think a lot of what was written here is great, but there's at least 3, probably 5 contentious things. And so I'll bet if we go around the room to the to all the directors, certainly the people out there, that there's going to be those 5 things brought up. So again, I don't think I can say I won't support this in one way or another, but I just can't. If one thing is wrong, then I don't think I can support it. I think we need to take it back, work on it some more, identify, like Dick Rhodes said, the contentious items, bring them up one by one, and then move towards approving the entire document. Thank you.
Okay, so Director Hurley.
Yes, this is a finished product. I mean, the working group has worked on this for what, 2 years? Something like that? A year? 6 months? 3 months? 2 months? A week? It doesn't matter. But this is a finished product. We need to approve it or not approve it. Sending it back to have them pick apart it again, to do what? And we'll be here, or the board will be here next year and going through the same thing. Let's approve it, let's get it on the books, and the Chartered Club Committee can decide what things need to be worked on and look at those specifically, rather than throwing out the whole kit and caboodle. That's my recommendation.
The baby in the bathwater. Yeah, Director Piaskowski.
Okay, so I know a lot of the audience are here because of the email, so do we take that out? Because we can't have a club without having information. It's impossible. And the fact is that as a club, you should be able to let your members opt out, right? So their name would still be there, but no information. Because guess what? I can look up Lynn Callis on the web, and I can find everything I need to know about her. And if I pay 99 cents, I can even get more information. So I'm just saying that for anyone that wants to find out who, what, and where you are, the mail list, the member list is not the get-all. So I would not approve this just for that reason.
I'm going to ask the author, the typist, Nick Turner, to speak.
I've picked up about 6 or 7 different things I can comment on, but I can start specifically with the email. Our intent is not to stifle club business. The wording that we've written, we were very careful, but clearly there has been some misunderstanding and misinterpretation, so perhaps that wording does need some clarification. I'm a member of several clubs which have different divisions and different groups. For example, sportsmen. They have their big wheels, they have their ATVs, they have their hiking. Looking across here, I see we've got the president of softball. Softball has their different leagues and their different teams. Pickleball has their different groups. We're not saying that the group leader cannot email the members of the group. That's club business. The president can authorize that. What we're saying is, me, as a member of the sportsman's club, if I find myself attracted to another member, I can just look up their email, invite them out for dinner. We're trying to stop that. And if you think that's far-fetched, it's happened. If you are a craft club, if you are a craft or an arts club, we're trying to stop members creating a fake email address and then emailing actual members of that club, telling them that their work is terrible. And if you don't want that to happen, it's happened. That's the kind of thing we're trying to stop. We're not trying to stop club business. Now, the governing board can send us back with direction to change that and allow any member of the club to find out the email address or phone number of any other member of the club. Or they can accept what is written there, and maybe we can tweak the language to make it all perfectly clear that for the transaction of club business, certain individuals within that club can have access to the contact information. You're organizing a tournament, somebody's dropped out, you need to find a replacement. The tournament director has the email addresses, he has the phone numbers, he can find a replacement. That's club business. It's the individual one-to-one contact is where the risk is. Now, I could go on to other items, but I can leave that there if you like.
I want to reinforce that, having done in my past life before I came here a global information security project, there are things called personal identifiable information, PII. If we can keep the comments, please. The PII must be kept private. We are a community of senior citizens. Putting that information out onto the internet lets the trolls and the bad guys get access to it. It has happened. I've had somebody in a club got my email address and then proceeded to subscribe me to these greeting card things. So now this greeting card company has my email address. I get spam because of that. So there's a responsibility that the association has to protect our members from those types of adverse events and effects. So as Nick said, the goal is not to stifle business. There are ways that you can work within the parameters of it, but you also have to understand as a club, you have a responsibility to protect your members from the trolls out in the world. The internet is not a happy place. I will tell you that. So any comments in response to Nick besides that? Any other? Yes, Director Pieskowski.
Okay, if we are so worried about our personal identification, why do we give our rec card number out when they have to come to the lectern to speak? That is our personal identification number for our rec center. That should not be given out, if that's what you're saying.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Then we need to change that policy. Because, in fact, the standing rule number 1 says that if you guys want to speak, you raise your hand, you stand. That policy is not even up to date. So our rec card number should never, and you talk about that being on YouTube, and YouTube is there forever.
Let's bring us back to this topic here at hand, but that is, Director Rhodes, did you have something?
No, my point was gonna be is we're drifting. You know, let's not drift. Let's focus on this.
So, so any other discussion from the board? I want to turn it over to the floor and get some feedback from some of the people out there.
I'm sorry, President Leary, but can I make some of the clarification statements first? That might,
Yeah,
if I come up at the end and
Yeah.
do that.
Yes,
you know,
please do.
I can answer some of the governing board's questions and issues straight
Yes,
away.
yes, please do.
First of all, this is not a rewrite, and it's deliberately not a rewrite, which is why it's a correction, it's a modification, and it's, you know, to the RR&Ps as is. The good ideas not worked on, which is in your packet, would have involved a rewrite, and we were deliberately not wanting to do a rewrite, because when these were adopted approximately a year ago, it was, let's adopt them, see what happens, adjust as necessary. So this we view as being an adjustment as necessary and not a rewrite. The accommodations piece is in there to allow a club, if it so wishes, to ask for an exception or an allowance, again, you know, to do something which is expressly forbidden by the RR&Ps. We believe it's right that there should be some methodology to do that. And what we're simply saying is that that request goes to the Chartered Clubs Committee, it gets a yes or no, and it then goes to the governing board. If you remove the accommodation section, they could just go straight to the governing board, but you will still have people who are asking for an accommodation. Because I don't know how many people do know or understand this, but the RR&Ps are a governing document of the association. They stand underneath the policies and bylaws, and they're enforceable by the administration. They are a governing document of the association, and therefore, like we put in a methodology there for them to be broken, if you like, with the permission of the governing board. Section on IRS, that's not a problem. That's a link. It also has no material changes. When it comes to having different sections for different types of clubs, as President Leary said, all of the rules apply to all of the clubs, but it will be a relatively simple fix, if you like, to put in paragraph 1 under the tournaments and events section. Simply say, this chapter applies to clubs that do tournaments and events. I don't know any club that doesn't do events. And tournaments are just a specific type of event. Every club, I believe, has an event. They have a party. They do something, you know. So if you're going to split special events out from tournaments, you're probably going to end up with a larger document because there'll be duplication of events and tournaments. So there's a certain amount of trying to keep this short, as long as it is. And the other thing I'll say is that most of the changes we've made, which are described as new or modified in the packet you've got, are there because something has happened, or they're there because there was an error in the document. One of which, of course, was that, as written, the Chartered Clubs Committee could violate policy by approving an accommodation, which I believe the policy well, it's not even a policy, I believe that violates a bylaw, never mind a policy. And the bylaws, of course, take precedent, so we just fix that. So there's a lot of that work that we did, as well as grammatical errors, full stops, run-on sentences, those kinds of things to make it more readable. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, as you come up to the lectern, please sign in and give your name and rec card number. Thank you.
Yeah, Jim Scott, 404675. I too invested hours in reading that document. Let's put a little color on that document. The policy 10, the procurement document for the association that spends $30 million. 2 pages. RR&Ps, 60 pages, 9 pages of which is discipline. I'm sorry, but this document needs a little bit more than a dot and an I and crossing a T. I did send a page of, you received them, of suggested edits and questions and comments. And I'm sorry, Director Hurley, stamping off on this as is would be, I apologize. You guys have put hours and hours of time into this, but that would be the wrong thing to do. Thank you.
All right, here we go.
Larry Plaster, ID 130627, president of the tennis club. First of all, I do want to thank the committee that did all this work. It is a lot of work, and there are some good things in their recommendations that should go forward. There are several that I think need to be pulled out before you can approve this whole document. And the major one that affects us is the policy 7.1, the changes to that about emails. And we've already talked a lot about that. But first of all, I want to say, Director Leary, you said we can't put emails on the internet. No one disagrees with that. This policy goes way beyond just putting it on the internet. We have our membership list on our website. The basic website is password restricted. The membership lists are password restricted, so it is restricted to club members only. And that doesn't keep anybody else from getting a hold of it. Sometimes they can. And as Director Paskowski said, you can go on the internet and look up most of that information on just about anybody. So if the tennis club members use those lists frequently, when you go out on the court, you don't write down people's last name and phone number. I've played sometimes for months with people and didn't even know their last name. But if I know their first name, I can find it by going to our website. Our members need that, and we've used it for years without a problem. Are we fixing a problem here for 1 or 2 instances that occurred in the past that were a problem? Are we making it more difficult for everybody? So I would ask that the board consider not approving 7.1 as worded and take that out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Diana Goman, 127269, and I'm co-president for our scrapbooking group here. And what I'm hearing most from our members is how are we going to work together? We are scrapbooking, we make cards, we send cards, not just for our outreach programs, but to each other. And how we've managed it in the past is to have an in-house roster, name, address, email. And to those we can send cards of sympathy and such. But we are a social group, so we do a lot of interaction together, even though we are over 100 members. So like the aforementioned gentleman here, 7.1 is a total revamping of how we would function. If it would be up for one person to decide how to allow someone to have access, eventually everyone's going to have access anyway. So while we don't post it on the internet, we make it available through our email to our members as the roster is updated. And I respectfully request that this be looked into further because it will make a huge difference on how we function as a club, how we function as our committees working together and with our clubs, notifying our people individually. And I respectfully request that you reconsider how that is worded and allow us at least, if it comes down to that this is an issue, at least let the members opt in or out, whether they're going to allow our other members to have their address and email and phone number information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aletha Delamo, 59669. I agree with everything she said, but I want to point out a flaw in the protecting people. I belong to, well, last year I belonged to 6 or 7 clubs. Each of those clubs has officers. When you join those clubs, you have to give them your personal information. So 6 or 7 clubs have 4 officers, all who have access, or at least some of whom have access. They leave the club, they go to another club, they've still got that information if they want to keep it. And so 6 or 7 officers from 6 or 7 clubs with 4 officers, you got a lot of people running around with the same information, so you're not protecting anyone. Because over time, everybody's going to know where everybody is. Opting in or out is a great idea, but you can't protect everybody from everything that happens with the internet or even phone calls. I mean, there's too many highly technically competent people out there. You can get the information, like Jolene said. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience? Should you give us your rec card, your name and rec card?
One 31829 Nick Turner. The discipline section, I agree, is long and convoluted, and we did have a look at that because there are multiple steps are the same depending on who it is who's been disciplined. And you could have a simplified list, but then you'd have a list of exceptions because if the person being disciplined is a club treasurer who has access to the money, you know, the process may be different because you might want to cut off their access to the money. And so you'd have an exception. So what you would have is a simplified list with lots and lots and lots and lots of exceptions. So we consciously left that alone because to redo that and do that in a reasonable way would, again, be a rewrite with a lot of effort. One other thing that we did do, which I didn't mention before, is we changed some of the rules around events and tournaments to allow commingling for special events which are charitable, and that has removed the need for at least 3 accommodation requests a year. That was deliberately done to just allow those events to continue without technically breaking a commingling rule. When it comes, going back to the email again, when it comes to email, yes, you can find anything you like about anybody on the internet. Sometimes you have to pay for it, sometimes it's free. But I wouldn't want to hand over that information freely to bad actors. A determined bad actor can find you. Everybody knows that. But I wouldn't want to be the source of the information that the bad actor got and used. You know, they can go and do that somewhere else. That said, if the board wishes to give the Charter Clubs Committee and the working group guidance about an opt-in or an opt-out, we'll take that guidance and we can produce some more wording.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have to do it every time I step up? That's okay. Jim Scott, 404-675. So I guess my one question is, why can't we take a lot of this and put it into the club bylaws and make this more of a high-level policy document and cover a lot of the meat and potatoes at the lower level with the club bylaws and the stuff that's respective to different clubs and their operating procedures versus trying to capture all of this into one encompassing document is my first question. And then my second is, I'm on the Budget and Finance Committee, and I've read all those policies, and I've read some of the other ones. Is this the one and only document that's this long? Because everything else is easy peasy.
Yes, the chartered clubs do not have policies like BNF and all the other policies that we have. RR&Ps are rules, regulations, and procedures. So it is different. It's treated as a policy in that it has to be reviewed each year, but it is different in that it also provides direction, specific prescriptive directions that our policies do not. And to answer your first question,
Please.
the bylaws have a template. There are certain things that must be in each club's bylaws, but outside of those items, clubs are allowed to edit and change and add things in specific to their club. So giving them putting this text into the bylaws could make it subject to being edited by different clubs, and we'd end up with different rules.
Agreed, but that has to be approved by the rec center, correct?
They are given guidance. Casey, you approve them? You approve the bylaws? Yes. But then that means she has to do it for 91 clubs.
Yeah, please. I know, no worries, everybody does it, you're not the only.
Okay, so I did kind of want to go over what you were just brought up. There is a template for mandatory verbatim edit, remove and stuff, as far as that's concerned, and that was put in place so that the clubs have the opportunity to format their bylaws for their needs, and that was very helpful. So bringing up redoing all the bylaws was a 2.5-year project. So to do that again, I think by having that template in there, that gives you the capability to go ahead and do that. So when I go through the bylaws, when you guys have amendment changes, then I review it to make sure it doesn't conflict anything in the RR&Ps or even the policies itself. So that's what I do. I review and make sure, or I make sure that it isn't something that's gonna overtake your club with guests and visitors as far as your membership is concerned. So to answer your question, if there was more flexibility allowed in the club bylaws individually to add more, that might be an option because they have it, but it just needs to be put in the right section. The RR&Ps are very long. Yes, I don't know them by heart. I've had them, well, they've changed every year I've been here. So, so I'm
life.
yes, it is. So I am constantly learning as well, but you know, I'm not opposed of any of your guys' ideas. I just need to know how I need to move forward, because you know, to Director Hurley's point, accept them, review them, and go through them, get through it again, and see what happens again. Or, you know, there are parts in there or areas that are very, very difficult and challenging for me with other clubs, because Clay Club is completely different than tennis. Tennis, even though it's a sports club, is completely different than softball. And everybody has their own ways of operating, and everybody has dedicated space or they don't have dedicated space. So there's so many variables that I have to look at and make sure that I'm making the right decision based on our policies and or your bylaws. So when I look at the RR&Ps, each club, I go to their bylaws as well. So we have 2 documents to make sure that they correlate. Mm-hmm. Does that help? Anything?
It does? Yes, thank you.
Immensely, yeah.
Let me
Thank you.
finish. Okay, Director Piaskowski.
I like Jim's idea about putting the discipline in the bylaws. One, because I really don't know how many members read the RR&Ps. So if we put that in the bylaws, could it be like in the bylaws where the clubs couldn't touch it? You know what I'm saying? That portion of the discipline would be in every club bylaws, but they couldn't really revisit it.
It used to be in their bylaws.
Oh, okay.
And then when the bylaws, when the bylaws reformatted, we put them in the RR&Ps so that when bylaws change, it takes it's a long process. It has to go through the board, then has to come through me for approval or review, and then it has to be posted for 30 days to vote at your next general membership meeting. And if you don't have frequent general membership meetings, then it could be prolonged to 6 months. So that's kind of the purpose of them being put in place at the RR&Ps. To say that they're not long is, oh my goodness, they are very long. And it's very interesting. When they got put in place 2 years ago, right? That's when they were added. I don't know why, but the world exploded with disciplinary actions. I mean, Riley was the past rec manager, and he couldn't believe how many disciplinary actions were flooding through. So, I like them being in the RR&Ps because it's one document. If it's a general rule, to expand the rules of, I know some clubs have their own policies that's not in their bylaws, have their own policies of making sure that both parties get the opportunity to defend themselves. So it's not automatically, hey, this happened to this person, let's discipline them. It's, we need to get the story from both. So some clubs already do have that, but it's in their operational manual. They're all called different, or their own P&Ps, stuff like that. So I'm just giving you what I know is happening and maybe some facts that we can figure out how we can silo this a little bit.
Maybe, I'm just suggesting that all clubs would say that they need to look at that in the RR&Ps, that they have that in their bylaws, because I bet you a lot of members of clubs don't look at that. But if they reference it in their bylaws, then they would know to go to it, like Tim said.
It's under code of conduct. It's very
Does
very
it reference
short.
it to the RR&Ps?
Yes,
it does, okay. And in every bylaw?
Yep, so in the bylaws, for every club, the bylaws, code of conduct, the first section is mandatory and verbatim. The second one is mass production, so that one is edit, replace, or delete, because if you're, card club, that's not gonna affect you. But those are the only two sections in that code of conduct, and this is one of them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Lynn Kellis, 129120. First off, I'd like to kind of tag on with what Casey's been doing. I, for one, having been a president for a few years, have really appreciated the change that did come about in the bylaws and the mandatory parts that are in there that remain in there and allow us the freedom to work within our club as to what suits us. So thank you for doing that. I know it was a lot of work. And also I want to thank Nick, Vicky, and their team for all the work that they have done on this document, on the RR&P. Sorry, Nikki. They've done a great job, and I know the emails, especially when they go out in mass, they all do need to be blind copied so people don't see them. Those can be misused in many ways, and I appreciate them putting that in. I do, however, hope that you'll reconsider passing this. The reason being is it really has caused a lot of discard and within the clubs, not just mine. There are many clubs, and trying to keep all the rumblings down. If we could have the option of opting in or opting out. Opting in, says, I'm okay with it, let me do it. Or, currently we do have the opt-out in our club, but we will work within whatever guidelines we are given. and make that work. We will find a way to make that work if that is not done, but just wanted to put that out there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, we'll do the online comments now.
I have 4 comments online. Some go back a half hour or better. Debbie Johnson, 130208. 60 pages of RR&Ps appears to be micromanaging clubs. FYI, I can Google a person's name and find their address, phone number, and email information. Number 2, Mary Gaynette, 133113. I get privacy, but believe the club should have the ability to publish a list of member phone numbers and emails for the member of the club that agreed to have them shared. And I have Debbie Johnson, 130208. The scenarios that Nick proposed will not stop by limiting information. There are laws to protect us from the trolls and the bad guys. The legal system takes care of that. M. Gaynette, 133113. It's fine to not publish personal info on the internet, but make the member info available to the other members within their club for those who approve of having it shared. And one last one. I do not have it's Debbie Johnson again, 130208. Should disciplinary action rules be changed frequently? Seems the rules should be standard. I know for a fact that in the past, the rec center and governing board haven't ensured processes were followed. That's it for online.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Director Piaskowski.
I'm pretty sure this is for Rudy. Rudy, in golf, do the clubs have their list? Do they share lists of their members? So would this also go to clubs in golf that you cannot share their? Because golf clubs are not under our RR&Ps, right?
They are.
Oh, they are. So then they could not share either. Is that correct? If we move this forward with no email addresses?
Club shares phone numbers.
Phone numbers. Because you guys all text, because you're so techy.
Director Rhodes.
Is it as simple as requiring opting in or opting out? I mean, I don't want to oversimplify it. Well, we do it, then what's the issue then? Because if people opt in, then they understand that, you know, they're going to be part of the address list.
Director Chatton, did you want to comment?
Sure. We're kind of going around in circles here. And I would suggest that we're not going to resolve all these issues today, but we still need a basis for our changes. We can't just have nothing out there and we're going to rewrite this part and that part and that part. And my suggestion would be that I would amend my motion, not formally at the moment, but I'm suggesting that I would amend my motion to remove any edits to section 7.1, which would take care of most of the objections that are here this morning, and that we would adopt the RR&Ps as revised, but I still say we don't just send it back to the working group. The board needs to come up with a list of those items that they would like to see specifically addressed in the RR&Ps that we can send to a working group, either the current one or a new one, and that they can take those one at a time, where the board sets priorities on the things that they would like to see addressed in the RR&Ps. But to just keep going around and saying, well, no, we don't want to do any of this, or we don't want to do any of that, we have to have a basis, just like the working group had a basis with the RR&Ps to work with. We still need a basis moving forward, and I think if we remove the changes to 7.1, that will take care of a lot of the issues brought here this morning, and maybe there are further edits to be made to that, but let's not try and rewrite that here this morning.
Director Rhodes.
So I would echo your recommendation. I think that is very valid. I would have a supplement to that. I don't believe that we in the governing board have the all-inclusive knowledge of what's contentious here. You know, I have my own issues that I want to deal with, and I look to Dennis and he has issues, and so, but I would really, I think it's critical that we move forward. You know, that we adopt something, but I would also, and I don't know how to say this without sounding, I want to invite the clubs to look at this and say, okay, what are the issues that you feel are contentious? So not just the governing board, but also I think this is kind of taking the second bite at the apple. You know, we approve this, send it out, and now let's continue to get feedback and continue to work on that.
Okay, Director Novello.
Thanks, President Leary. I think very similar, right? What we're trying to get to here is a starting point. I would support, if there is an amendment, then I could actually support this, right? The amendment that Director Chatton just outlined. I think I understand the intention, and the intention was good. It seems as though the wording may not align in some people's views to the intention. So if we can remove those changes, we may have that next round of improvements that we could move forward with, number one. Number two, I remind every governing board director that a working group is not a subcommittee, it is not an enduring group. So we could formulate suggestions and recommendations, or whatever we want to call them, for the consideration of the chair of the Chartered Clubs Committee, who is Director Chatton. We could provide that input to that committee. The committee can then decide how to proceed. Again, the policy C05, I believe it is extremely clear that there is a charter document that must specify exactly the start and end date and the exact deliverable of that working group. Again, this working group has met their deliverable, whether we approve it or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this is the last round. I think we're starting to churn here a little bit. Director Horvath.
Okay, thank you, President. So one other thing that I was looking at here is on page 23, it says Charter Club activity, special event, tournament, and leagues, and removes reciprocity and accommodations. So, see, that's what I really worry about, is by approving a document, you know, that's already faulted, we'll accidentally approve something that's incorrect.
I believe those items were put in different places in the document.
Okay,
And they're just removed from this section. Director Hurley.
President Leary, I call for the vote.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. I've been advised by our parliamentarian that we have to take a vote on the call for vote. It has to pass by 2/3. That means that we have to have 6 votes. I'm going to...
Can I ask a question?
No.
I don't understand.
So it's a parliamentary procedure, so we have to, he's calling for the vote, he's ending discussion by doing so.
Can you say no?
No. It's a call for the vote. So what we would be voting on is whether to vote now or continue discussion.
Okay.
So yes, you vote yes, that means we're ready to vote now. If you say no, then we will continue on. Okay, I'll start with Director Hurley.
Yes.
Director Rhodes.
My vote yes is to continue the discussion.
So that's a no. That's a no.
Yes means end the discussion, period.
No means continue the discussion.
My vote's no.
Okay, Director Williams.
Yes.
Director Piaskowski.
I have to say no.
Okay. Director Shatton.
No.
Director Novello.
No.
Director Graham.
Yes.
Director Horvath.
No.
What's the score? No, I'm asking them.
Dennis, were you a no? I was a no. We have 4 no's and 3 yeses. So let me review.
That's only 7.
Because it was going very fast, so.
Okay, let's.
Tim Hurley as yes. By the way, I want to clarify, is this to stop debate or is this to vote?
Stop debate.
Okay, stop debate, correct? Okay. Tim Hurley voted yes. Dick Rhodes voted no. Kate Williams voted yes. Jolene Piaskowski voted no. John is the person that I believe I may have skipped. No. John voted no. So, and just to keep reviewing, Christine Novello voted no. Rudy Graham voted yes. Dennis Horvath voted no. That gives the no count 5.
Okay.
Yes count 3.
Then we will continue discussion. Director Rhodes.
I think I have to admit, I did not understand that. You know, my vote has to be a yes on this, that I want to call for the vote. So from a parliamentary procedure, am I to be skewered or what?
You need to leave the room.
I got it in
5 minutes.
Okay, so Bonnie, he can change his vote.
He can change his vote.
Now, a yes vote is to stop debate. Is that correct? I want to be sure everybody understands. A yes vote is
Okay.
to stop or curtail debate so
Right.
we can move on to a vote. Is kind of
So for those at home, yes is we stop debate.
Yes.
No is we continue debate. So we have now, the score is,
4 yes votes.
and how many no votes?
4. So
Okay, so as the tiebreaker, I've,
no, wait, we'll do 2/3. We need 2/3.
hey, 2/3. We must continue debate.
Yes.
Okay, Director Chatton.
I voted no simply because before we vote on the motion that's before us, I would like to amend it to remove 7.1. That's why I voted no.
And I second that.
So as far as process on amending the motion,
So are we,
That's fine. He can just admit it and then do it again.
you just amend it? Okay, so we will take a vote on, well, please read your amended motion, Director Chatton.
per recommendation of the Chartered Clubs Committee and with input from Sun City West Chartered Clubs, I move that the governing board approve in gross language revisions to the revised RR&Ps, Chartered Club Rules, Regulations, and Procedures, as redlined as of March 25th, with the addition of edits to 7.1 be removed.
Okay.
So similar to Christine's situation that earlier we need
two motions. First on the edit, the amendment, and then.
Okay, so we have to vote on, we have to,
Second his amendment.
okay, so we have to vote on the amendment.
Question.
I'm sorry, first on the edit.
I second the,
Okay, you second, Director Hurley.
Does that mean the words in here that are in red?
Would be struck.
Correct. Go back to the original section 7.1.
Okay, so now we have to vote on the amendment, which is the removal or the return of 7.1 to its original state. So yes, you're voting that we return it to its original state. No is that you keep it as redlined. So I'll start with Director Horvath.
Yes.
Director Grom.
No.
Director Novello.
Yes.
Director Chatton.
Yes.
Director Piaskowski.
Yes.
Director Williams.
Yes.
Director Rhodes.
yes,
Director Hurley.
Yes.
Okay, so now we got 7-1 on that. So now we move to vote. If you can read your amendment, your motion again with the amendment. It's as the language is as amended. So engross revision, as amended.
All right. Per recommendation of the Chartered Clubs Committee and with the input from Sun City West Chartered Clubs, I move that the governing board approve in gross language revisions as amended to the revised RR&Ps, Chartered Club Rules, Regulations, and Procedures as redlined as of March 2025.
So I don't need another second. I don't need a second.
So I would put as amended and parenthetically.
No, you're good. My question was just whether I needed a second or not. You're good. Yes, Director Hurley.
As redlined as of March 2025?
That's whatever the identifier is, yes. Oh, March 20. Okay, so we are messing with the space-time continuum here. So I'm going to ask you to amend your motion again, John.
Do I need to include 7.1 in the?
No, just say, because it's been amended, you say as amended and then say February 20.
Per recommendation of the Chartered Clubs Committee and with the input from Sun City West Chartered Clubs, I move that the governing board approve in gross language revisions as amended to the revised RR&Ps, Chartered Club Rules, Regulations, and Procedures as redlined as of February 2025.
Okay, I think we got it this time. Okay, so we'll do a vote. Yes is to approve and accept the amended changes, the in-gross revisions minus the 7.1. That's yes. No is to deny them. I'll start with Director Hurley.
Yes.
Director Rhodes.
yes,
Director Williams.
Yes.
Director Piaskowski.
Yes.
Director Chatton.
Yes.
Director Novello.
Yes.
Director Grom.
Yes.
Director, excuse me, Horvath.
No.
Okay, 7-1. The motion has passed. It has been accepted with as amended. So 7.1, those changes will not be as part of the revised RR&Ps. Okay, Director Chatton?
Okay, we got that out of the way. Well, we still have to discuss process going forward. there are still many issues that the board is not happy with and that some other residents and clubs are not happy with. So I think we need to talk about the process going forward, or would you rather the Chartered Clubs Committee discuss that and make a recommendation to the full board?
I would rather do that because we cannot add an agenda item. So I will turn that back to the committee, the Chartered Clubs Committee, and do that.
Got that, Karen?
I do indeed. We were about to remind. Thank you, Jack.
Okay, well, thank you for the, we're good. We're at director comments. So I will start, Director Rhodes, I'll start with you.
Thank you. I would like to remind the governing board that we have just gone through a very painful exercise of a document that has been fully invested for hundreds of hours. And as silly as this is going to sound, I'm proud of us. I think we moved it forward. I'm not proud of everything that's in it, but I think that we have a point that now we can continue to move forward, and that we have a responsibility for those issues that we believe that are, as we've been calling them, contentious, to provide that feedback to Director Chatton in the Charter Clubs Club. But I also want to make sure and invite, if I can do this, our clubs to review this document and for you to do the same thing, for you to provide feedback to the charter clubs. So to that, I think that today was a success. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hurley, do you have any comments?
No additional comments.
Director Williams?
Enough said, no more comments.
Okay. Director Piaskowski?
I just think that we need to relook at those. So have fun, John.
Director Chatton?
Why does it come back to me? Oh, man. Yeah, I think it's kind of a brutal process, but it's a necessary process. And I do hope that both directors and clubs will contact myself or the Chartered Clubs Committee, any member, and bring forward those items that you would like to see us discussing at our next Chartered Clubs meeting, which is next Tuesday, no, the 4th, March 4th at 1:30 in this room. So anybody who would like to come and voice their recommendations, that would be a good time to be here. So thank you.
Director Novello?
Thank you. I thank my fellow directors for speaking so frankly and clearly on this. And for all, I think it's a great indication. We've heard in the past residents believe that the governing board simply is a rubber stamp community, and we don't spend any time debating. Today is proof positive that we are not a rubber stamp community, and I'm glad of that. Not that we ever were, I'm just saying I'm glad of that, number one. Number two, a little commercial. I'll pivot from RR&Ps, but Budget and Finance Committee is currently reviewing several items of extreme importance to every single owner member. Those items are our budget, our operating budget, as well as that investment policy we heard about last week, but especially the budget. There were very few residents who were able to attend, so just want to call everyone's attention. The last Budget and Finance Committee meeting was extremely long. We may have set a new record there, Director Rhodes, but it was extremely long and necessary. We went through a great presentation from our staff on the proposed financial plan for next year. Please review that. Our next Budget and Finance Committee meeting is March the 4th at 9 o'clock in this room. Please attend, watch the video, participate online in any way you need to. Everybody needs to be aware of what's before us, and everyone welcomes your comments. I'm sure the directors do, and the committee welcomes them as well. Thank you.
Director Grom,
Nothing to add.
Director Horvath.
Well, I'm very glad to see the democratic type process in effect. One thing I'd like to say is I'm glad we took 7.1 out, because I don't think you can legislate morality, and that's part of the fact of the life. The other thing I'd recommend is, like, maybe instead of trying to review a document and update an entire document, maybe it should be done a couple of chapters at a time or a third at a time or something like that, to bring that committee like to the governing board like this. That's right. It's a monumental task, and one that doesn't leave anybody, including myself today, happy that I voted no. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. General Manager, any comments?
Thank you, President Leary. So to switch gears just a little bit, I just want to send the condolences to the family of the member that passed yesterday at Palm Ridge, and really commend our team. You know, there were folks that were involved in that directly. That's a hard thing to deal with at that moment of trying to revive somebody, and unfortunately the individual did pass. So I just want to again throw up my condolences to that family, but also really proud of our team for how they responded, and you know, they're dealing with that situation, but sad day yesterday.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'll open the floor to comments from our guests.
I apologize, but you're not going to like this. When you made the amendment for removing the 7.1, can you repeat the verbiage that you used? Do you by chance have it written down?
We didn't remove 7.1. We removed the amendments to 7.1 that were.
The amendment was to remove 7.1.
Oh, the amendment
Yes.
to the motion. I'm sorry.
Yes, but there's two 7.1s. You didn't identify the chapter. Just for a matter of record.
So from a matter of record, yes, you are correct. I think it's page 46.
Chapter 7 and Chapter 10 both has 7.1s.
Yeah. Thank you for catching that. The 7.1 that we removed is on page 46. It is under the main category of publicity. So we are removing that 7.1 in Chapter 8. Okay, thank you.
You bet.
And we do like that. Any other comments from the audience? Okay, any comments online? No comments online. Then with that, our next meeting is the Governing Board Workshop, March 14th, 9 a.m. in this room. And the next Governing Board regular meeting is March 20th in this room at 9 o'clock. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting at 11:04 a.m.